Discover your inner goddess and live up to your highest value and most abundant potential. Welcome to Grateful Goddesses, a podcast that empowers you to unleash your inner goddess and take the leap of faith to live your best life. Your guide, Karen Pulver, joins her fellow goddesses in soulful conversations about gratitude, personal growth, authentic living, and a bevy of topics affecting women today. Let's start the show with your host, Karen Pulver.
Thank you all for joining us today on Grateful Goddesses. So we've been in quarantine now for probably 6-7 months. And what's nice about this quarantine is we have gotten to see our home and our spaces a little better. We've gotten to know them better. And one thing I know for sure that I'm missing is connection to people, connection to the environment, connection to the world besides my television, right? So our guest today is Sadie Morgan, and what she does, and I'll just read this little quote, what she does is combining infrastructure and housing that allows for better public connectivity and happier residents, which adds to the quality of life. And all of her buildings have soul. And what I love about Sadie is that not just because she's a dear friend, she loves life. We have so much fun when we see her, but she really does tap in to the human soul in her work. She doesn't just design a building because that's what she's commissioned to do. She really does look at the relationships of the people, what will help them with their morale, to help them feel better about where they live and how they're living. So we're going to talk to her. So welcome, Sadie, to Grateful Goddesses.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hello.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very honored.
We're very honored to have you. Okay, so I have to talk about the story when my husband and I came to London and we met you and we got on our bicycles.
Oh my goodness, yes.
And you were just smiling and let's go. And I said, I think it's going to rain. And you said, no, it's fine. Let's just go. Meantime, I'm riding on the opposite side of the road, kind of confused. You knew the city like the back of your hand. We were going a zigzag way ahead and started to downpour, right? And you said, oh, well, we could stop somewhere. So we stopped at a hotel and we had some champagne. And I remember worrying about my hair getting frizzy, you know, when you have the blowout before you go away. And I thought, oh, and I drenched, and you were just happy and smiling, and I loved your laugh, and your attitude was just so positive. So your motto in life is, I'll be okay as long as I enjoy what I do and I'm passionate about it. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, do you know what? I think if you get to a certain sort of point in your life and you've tried really hard, when you study architecture, it takes a really long time. And as an architect, it's very competitive. You know, it's like many different professions, but it's a very competitive profession. There aren't many women in it. So, you know, it takes a kind of lot of energy and effort to kind of get anything built, to do anything. And I think I'm naturally hard on myself. I'm naturally hard on myself. And I got to this point when I suddenly just thought, you know what? All that really matters is that I enjoy what I do. And if I enjoy what I do, then it actually comes out in the buildings. And I talked about this before, but I genuinely believe that if you're happy and you're positive and you love what you do, then you create things that have that kind of energy. And so I'm very proud that, you know, the buildings that we make feel joyful, and you look at them and you think, do you know what, there's a really positive energy about them. So I just think that if you throw yourself into a place and you think, do you know what, I'm not great at everything, and I'm certainly really terrible at quite a lot of things, but, you know, let's you know, there are things that I am good at, and, you know, and I should celebrate those, and if I'm happy about doing them, then I think that comes out in your work.
If I remember correctly, you don't love to cook, right?
No, it's not one of my strong points. No, it's not one of my strong points. But luckily, I have a very lovely partner who's incredibly good at cooking. So,
that's right. A fish pie. right?
Fish pie.
Fish pie.
Fish pie, lots of fish. He's catching lots of fish at the moment.
That's right. Can you tell us a little bit more about your journey to where you are today, and how did you have this passion of becoming an architect when you were younger, and how did it transform over the years?
Well, the honest truth is no, I didn't. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. Well, that's not true. First of all, I wanted to be an actress. Then I wanted to become a doctor. All my family are medics. So all my studies, the exams that I took were all kind of geared towards becoming a medic. And then anyway, to cut a long story short, I ended up going to do a foundation course, which is an art foundation, because I needed a year and to do before I could end up doing something else. And I did this art foundation, and I thought, my God, I love it. I absolutely love it. I love the kind of creative, making things and doing things. And I have a very three-dimensional mind, so I can connect things together. And I think that that's something that I hadn't appreciated, I suppose, until a little bit later. So architecture and the built environment has always been something that I'm really incredibly passionate about, but more in a way of more about how it kind of affects people rather than the buildings itself.
Right.
So I think that, I love architecture, but I don't love it in the way that perhaps classic, kind of you'll meet another architect and they'll be able to tell you all the history or whatever about certain buildings. That's not me. I think the things that really inspire me are buildings that really connect to people, where that they add to a city or they add to a place in a really positive way. So for me, I would say it's the built environment. And as I've moved through my career and kind of come out the other end, it is that bigger picture that is really kind of exciting me at the moment.
You can tell when I was looking at the buildings and just watching some of the YouTubes that are on, you talk a lot about communal spaces and even stairwells, like really thinking about how people move around their environment so that they can have that connection, which I feel is important regardless of, living through a pandemic, but especially with what's going on in the world. I'd like to now bring on our featured goddesses, and we're going to start with Joelle.
I am so fascinated by your upbringing on a commune.
Yes.
I think the idea of communal living is personally really compelling. It's something that's completely outside of any experience I've ever had, and particularly now when we're so boxed into our own individual spaces, I think it's even more compelling. So I'm really curious, you're talking about how the built environment connects with people more so than what is the lineage and the history of particular building or style. So I'm really curious about how the experience that you had living amongst a wider net of people has informed and influenced how you look at the interaction of built environment and the inhabitants. Well,
it's funny. I mean, of course, when you grow up, you don't know that you're living in, you don't know that things are different to other people. So my grandfather, he lost his brother in the war. It really did affect him. And he decided to try to live very differently. So after the war in the UK, big houses were very cheap, because nobody could afford them. So he and a group of other families, 3 other families, bought a very big house and decided to live together, and have done, and so when I was brought up, I didn't really have a nuclear family. Families would have an apartment, but they would take one room per person. That was the rule. So the apartments were very small, but the communal spaces and the grounds were very big, 100 acres, beautiful land, it's an incredible place to live. So you had small apartments, but you shared many things. And I think learning to share very early on is a very, is a very wonderful thing. So I don't really, I don't have that connection to sort of needing objects That's not to say I don't like buying dresses, but or shoes. But you grow up in a way that where your materialism isn't something that you're connected with, but what you are connected with are the relationships that are around you. So I used to come home from school every day when I was 6-7 years old. I used to look after my great grandmother. She was 111 when she died. She was the oldest woman in Great Britain. Nothing to do with my care. I think more to do with the jubonnet that she had every evening before she went to bed. But and that carried on with my own children. So as I lived there, and then my children were brought up there, they would go and we would feed the old lady who was our neighbour. Every Sunday night, we'd take it in turns, which meant that she didn't have to go into an old people's home because she was looked after, and in return, she would read to my children. And so you have this incredible network where you really appreciate generational differences in a way that I think often, young people don't really have that connection to older people so much anymore. So I think that was very special. So I had I suppose, an upbringing where I didn't have to rely on my parents for everything. So I didn't need to rebel because I had lots of people in the house who would teach me lots of different things. Nuclear physicist lived above me. He would help me do my homework. A rather racy barmaid would teach me everything I didn't need to know at an early age. So there were kind of pockets of experiences and people who would help me in my kind of life journey in a way that I think you're not necessarily exposed to if you're just within an insular family. Mm-hmm. So for me, it taught me many things: the power of sharing, the importance of generational, different generations. But also I think that you don't need a huge amount of space. You need something that's comfortable and makes you happy, but actually shared space and that sense of community is something that is so fundamentally important for our well-being. And it drove me to set the Quality of Life Foundation up, and we've done a load of really interesting research across the whole of the UK. And the first findings of which is that community is actually at the heart of everything that makes your quality of life better, and among a number of other things, but actually community is one of the things that really strikes a chord with everybody. So I think it's not for everybody, but interestingly, as we move through, COVID, and as you say, we're looking perhaps to live in a different way, in a way that's much more connected and cares for people in a way that perhaps, we haven't done so in the past. So I think all these things come around. It's really interesting.
Rachel has some questions about belonging.
How do you, when you're designing building and you talk about community, like what part of the design informs building community? What are elements that you include, and what are things even for us to consider as just in the way we live our lives in our homes and in our communities? Like, what are things that help engage community and bring it together?
Gosh, that's a really good question. I mean, when you're designing new buildings, big apartments, identity is something that's very important. So people having a sort of identifiable front door, even if you share that front door with a lot of people, if you have just the same as everybody, as everybody else, you don't really have that sort of sense of identity and belonging. Making sure that if you have a stair call, you have only a few people, who come off of that staircase. So very long corridors, like hotel corridors, where endless doors means that you never really bump into your neighbours. So opportunities to kind of bump into people you can engineer those. You can kind of make places or spaces where people, can connect, and that's usually in stairwells or in communal gardens, or making places where people can grow things together or play together, and I think that if you allow people to walk much more sort of active spaces. So rather than in the UK, we went through a period of putting everybody in lifts to go up. but actually you can create much more activity by making beautiful stairwells, not stairwells that look like they're the escape route in a fire, but, you know, ones where you can connect with the outside that really feel like they're joyous and that you actually want to take the stairs. You know, community is also about shared experience. So making places that everybody feels that they need to contribute to, I think is very important. And so having shared garden spaces, shared allotment spaces, understanding that, you know, kids might want to play football, but the elder generation might not want to be that disturbed. So having places and spaces that are flexible and that allow all those different things to happen, but are connected. So visual connectivity is very important as well. And then connecting with nature, I think, is something that everybody aspires to. So having balconies that you can go out on and see people, and, you know, in the UK and London in particular, we don't, you know, there's a lot of people who live in big apartment buildings, and having that visual connection, that outdoor space, or that ability to sort of bump into your neighbor, I think is something that's really, really valuable. And you can sort of engineer, if you like, you can design that into your buildings.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Sadie, you've been such an inspiration. Many of your accolades involve women and doing, you know, so many firsts for women, and you are quite an inspiration. Laura has a question for you regarding that.
Hi, Sadie. So great to get to know you today. And one of the things I was struck by was your amazing leadership strategy of being so heartfelt in the way you speak and share your stories about your journey in business and in life. And I am also like, it's just amazing your goal of having a gender balanced workplace. So how do you plan to inspire and mentor young women coming into the workforce in your field in 2020?
Well, I you know, that's a really good question. I mean, I think one of the first things you have to do is just show that leadership. So you can't talk about gender balance and have an office which is just full of men for a start. So we have actually more women than men in our practice, and we just made 3 new directors, which brings even the directorship up to 50-50, which is incredibly unusual. I think you're finding a lot of women kind of moving from, you know, sort of from graduation through and to, but very few women are still making it to directorship level. So the first thing to do is to, you know, lead by example. And then the second thing I think is just to make in dRMM, the practice, you know, my architecture practice, allow everybody to feel that they have something to contribute. So whenever we have a crit or we pin up the work, we encourage everybody to speak. So everybody from the intern to the director, and if the intern has a really good idea, and generally they do, you know, often it's the younger generation who are really, you know, they're super critical. Yeah. They have fantastic ideas, and you're like, why didn't I think about that? So it's very important to allow everybody to feel comfortable to speak and to challenge. And we do that by encouraging people. We have a pin-up. We call it pin-up on Friday night. We all have beers, and everybody learns to show their work. So they have they pin up their work in front of the team. And I tell you what, pinning up in front of your own team is the hardest thing to do. So we try to actively help people to not only feel confident in critiquing and asking questions, but also in explaining their work and doing so in a kind of safe place. And then really just making sure that when you go to meetings with important clients, you take people along with you so that they have that exposure and they understand that actually clients are just as, you know, they're just humans, you know, they're just human beings. And you know, I think it's confidence, especially with young women, it's confidence. But we have the most extraordinary young women who are doing incredible things in our business. And, I just take any opportunity. Lots of people write to me and say, can I speak to you, or could I come and see you? And if I can, I will always take the time to have a coffee or connect on the phone, or even just email back and say, I'm sorry, I'm so busy. But, I think it's just important to be available and say, and the same. And it's a bit like being human. It's about having that vulnerability. And, often I think, gosh, I overshare, if I give a lecture and people ask me a question and I'm like, tell them everything they don't need to know. But it's important because I think if you show your humanity and you show that it's not that easy, or it's just as difficult, or you have, nothing's perfect, then I think it allows, particularly, I suppose, young women to see that there is a pathway, and there is every opportunity, and there's absolutely nothing that should hold them back, particularly not themselves.
That's extremely inspiring, and I think that could be a model for all fields, just to make people feel included from the bottom up, and that feeling of everyone's human, and taking away the fear of speaking in front of the clients. I think that's really inspirational.
Camille is joining us too. She has some questions. We all go through roadblocks, so she'd like to ask you about that.
Yeah, I love what you were mentioning about that, being transparent and sharing that humanitarian side of yourself, and showing how you were able to overcome, and maybe even oversharing like you mentioned earlier. But so many women, whether young or later in our careers, we end up going through roadblocks, and you had a rather large one with going through cancer. Can you share a little bit about how as a community, actually, how we can just really help people going through those different things, or even advice you would give for others as far as getting over those roadblocks?
Well, I say, whenever anyone asks me about my cancer, I say, if I stay alive, and I'm always touch wood. I always touch wood when I say that. If I can stay alive, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. In that it's when you go through life and you're whacking, and every life takes over, and suddenly you're faced with your own mortality, and it does absolutely everything it says on the tin. You literally sit there and you think, oh my God, I'm, what matters to me? and so it's this extraordinary sort of moment of reflection, I suppose. And that's exactly what happened to me. I really took stock of my life. I decided that I needed to change my work-life balance, and I now never work at weekends. I finish, that's not entirely true, but I really try hard to look after myself in a way that perhaps I wasn't doing so well. And I also wrote about it. I write a number of articles for magazines and papers, and I wrote about it, and I didn't realize how much of an effect that would have, because of course suddenly it was on kind of front page news of but my kind of industry news. And I was thinking, golly, really, is it? And actually it's a story that few people admit to, and suddenly I had loads of people write to me and say, the same's happened to me, and it's really amazing that you're talking about it. And I suppose if there's a lesson that I took out of it, it's that when I came out of my surgery, and I'm changed as a woman. I have a breast that doesn't belong to me, and although, as I say to my children, I now have teenage bosoms. They're incredible. But they're like, "Mum, can you stop showing off your bosoms to everyone?" And I'm like, "They're incredible." But so you come out a changed person, physically very changed, but also mentally very changed. And for me, I think I probably went a bit over the top. I had to eat. I was eating up life. I climbed Kilimanjaro. I cycled halfway across the world. I did all these kind of crazy things because I wanted to prove that I was alive and that I could do it. And I think after about a year and a half, I was actually quite tired. I was like, suddenly thought, my goodness me, I am, if I carry on like this, I'm going to kill myself, doing something really silly. So I've sort of calmed down a bit now. It's not something I would wish on anybody. But I also think that it's an experience that you have to learn from. And you have to take the positives from, and the positives that I've taken from it is that I really am happy to be alive, and I'm really, I really love my life, and I'm really grateful for it, and that's something that I don't think you can have that kind of intensity of realization until you really do think you're going to die.
Thank you so much for sharing. That was great.
Joelle is going to piggyback off of that. I did mention to the group that you went to Burning Man.
Yeah.
And I started to tell them a little bit about your experience that you had shared with us. I'm not sure if you want to share it today, but Joelle has some questions about that.
I read, Karen told us, and then in reading through some of the voluminous information about you, that one of, or maybe the best piece of advice you've received is work hard, play hard.
Yeah.
And it sounds like Kilimanjaro and Burning Man are examples of that philosophy. So I'm curious, I think we've heard a bit about the work hard, play hard, perhaps before your cancer diagnosis, and then in that year and a half after the cancer diagnosis. I'm curious about what work hard, play hard means for you now, after going through that intense period of reconfirming life and vitality. And now it sounds like you're in a place where maybe things have mellowed a bit. And so I'm curious what work hard, play hard means to you now.
Gosh, that's a really good question. It came from a tutor that I had when I was at the Royal College of Art, years and years ago. I think it really was the best piece of advice, because I think in order to, as I talked before, if you really want to get the most out of your profession, you have to be happy. And if you are happy, then you have to have a proper kind of balance of work and life. And work hard, play hard has always meant to me that if an opportunity comes or somebody asks me to do something, I just say yes. And I've always tried to take, I've always encouraged myself to push myself out of my comfort zone and to take on new experiences and to, take some risks. What does it mean now? I think it means that I allow myself to take time out, and and the Burning Man experience is quite an extraordinary, it's an extraordinary thing to do, and I think it teaches you many things. It teaches you that not to judge other people, not to be judged. You have a kind of freedom over 4 or 5 days that you don't experience in any other, situation. And I think that if you embrace that way of being for a short period of time, it's incredibly, it's incredibly freeing. And they had, I think Karen was talking about this. They have a parade where the women go do a topless cycle ride, and there was a moment in time when everybody was asking if I would feel comfortable, because of course I don't have a breast, and so I said, yes, of course, and the whole of the camp that I was in wanted to do it for me, and the woman who it's a circus. They put on this incredible. The camp that I'm in is run by a guy who puts on this incredible circus show. So all the performers were there, and there's this incredible young woman. She was 22 years old, and she was a makeup artist, and she painted my body, and she was overcome, and she was painting me, and I said, is everything okay? Because it's like you're a bit embarrassed, because some people might think it's a bit unattractive. And she said, no, I've had a double mastectomy like you, because I have the BRCA gene, and I'm so ashamed that I can't ever show anybody, and I'm so amazed that you're doing this, and I just want to pay. And she honestly, she gave me this. She just painted this most beautiful kind of decoration over my body, and the whole of the camp went and cycled with me, and it was the most extraordinary. I mean, it's just like you're doing it, you're thinking, oh my goodness, I'm cycling around, topless with what am I doing? But actually it was the most incredible kind of feeling of togetherness. There were like 8,000 women, cycling. Maybe not, I can't remember, but a huge, thousands of women cycling around, just like, we're proud, and there were all shapes and sizes, and other women who'd had mastectomies, and it was the most incredible experience. And then you come to the end, and they do a big arch, and they let you through. And there's something very English, very reserved about the English, and we always think the Americans, you're all say, oh, you're so wonderful, and you're like, go girl, you're so amazing, and it was so uplifting, and I went through this sort of set of human hands, and I was just in tears, and because I think it was the first time that I'd ever really exposed myself in a way that and that I'd felt comfortable and proud, and it was an extraordinary experience, and I think and the nicest thing, that the 2 years I've gone every other year since, and the woman who painted me that first time, every single year she comes specially to paint me, and the last year she came and she did herself as well. And it was just very wonderful. So it's these things aren't for everybody, but for me it was a really important moment, I suppose, in the journey of kind of coming out a different person.
Thank you for sharing that.
That's such a beautiful story. That just is you. Like when I met you and we went biking, and you're in the rain, and I'm worried about, my hair getting frizzy, and you're just, come on, let's go. It's so fun. So what's that? Sorry.
You did get so wet.
We got so wet, but it was fun, and just seeing your positive attitude towards it was so inspiring. And not to turn the tables now, but we have to address the pandemic. And Alyssa has a question as to how it relates to architecture.
Hi, Sadie. How are you?
Hi, good, thank you.
Thank you. We've talked a lot about community today, and not just community, but sort of the support we get from sort of living and working amongst our various communities, right? So you talked about the support that young interns and young architects get from just being able to sort of gather, physically, in the conference room at your firm, or, even the support and the comfort that you get from, living in more of a communal space in the stairwell or the community garden. And so I have to ask, what is the conversation in your industry, perhaps in your firm, and really, what are your own sort of personal kind of creative resources telling you about where we go from here in terms of spaces, right? Building spaces both for work and for home. And do you see that changing? You know, what are there sort of profound changes on the horizon in the world of how and where we work and we live? Just curious about what architects like yourself are thinking about.
It's a really good question, and I think that it's a you know, I've been on so many webinars where like, what is the future of retail space? What's the future? You know, it's a really difficult one. I think. I mean, in the short term, if you're, you know, where I am in London, the city of London, you know, where people come to work, it's completely dead. And because this, you know, because commercial is dead, then retail is dead, and so it's having a profound effect on the centre of our city. If you think about the way we live in our homes, suddenly we're all, you know, I've been working from home, and that has its challenges, because you need to make sure that you can leave your work behind. And so there are different, you know, how do we make sure that if we are going to be working from home, that we're comfortable, we're not just sitting at the kitchen table, or if we are, then we're able to take our, you know, make sure that when it comes to the evening that we move our work away, or, you know, so there's lots of sort of small changes that we make. Also, I think that one of the big things that we've learned as a profession is how important green space is, and the spaces between buildings. So we did a lot of research that came back saying connection to connection to greenery, connection to outdoor is really, really important. And I think as we move, as our cities start to change, so what's happening in London is that because there were no cars, the infrastructure is now changing. Nobody wants to get on the tube. You know, no one wants to be in confined spaces. So cycling, everybody's, you know, the cycle lanes are suddenly full. People are walking. People are thinking about interacting in our city in a different way. So the outside becomes very important. So actually, it's not just the buildings that will change, but it's the public realm, the parks and the interstitial spaces that we need to really start to think about, and also making sure that we design our buildings with outdoor space. So I don't know if you had the Clap for Carers, but we had on every Thursday evening, we would go and clap. Everybody come out of their houses and clap to show their appreciation for the support services. And I'm lucky enough to live in a beautiful apartment. I have a terrace, but I'm living in the city, so I'm in an apartment building. I came out and I'm opposite some social housing, and suddenly you have tiny apartments, and suddenly 7, 8, 9 people come out of them, and they're all, and you just think, my God, and at that point they were locked down. They were inside, and these small kids who were just, and you just think that we have to start thinking about how we build our cities to allow families to have the kind of space they need. And if they don't have the space they have within their homes, then we have to give them space that they feel safe in, and that they can connect with nature, that they can grow food in, that they can cycle around their bikes, they can play, football or whatever it might be. So we have to make our cities work much harder, I think, than they have in the past. Mm-hmm. And we have to think about the long-term effects of people, I think, probably continuing to work from home. Not full time, but definitely there's going to be a shift, I think, between studio work and home work, and that will be, I think, that will have a profound effect on our cities and our homes.
Here in Chicago, we were blessed to have a really beautiful summer, and so people were outside every moment they could be. And now we're hoping that winter doesn't hit us too hard for quite a while, and we're trying to stretch this summer, fall, period as long as we can, because we're seeing how important it is to, we're all living and working in the same space. You need to get outside. So
that's right. And I think, what's happening is it's disproportionately affecting those people who are already not as lucky as many of us, so the inequalities in society are really coming out, and those that kind of haves and have-nots. I think it's really important that we kind of we not only appreciate what we have, and that we have the ability and space, but we think, as architects and people who are designing our built environment, it's really important that we try to make it better for everybody, I think. Yeah. A big lesson for me.
Well, here in Chicago, and I'm sure other states as well, or countries, a lot of people don't have internet. So we've seen stories of families driving up to outside restaurants and doing their homework in their car, and even just re-examining your space. Like the office that I'm in right now used to be a great storage room, and now we fight over it between my husband and I. We fight over this room, and this always gets redecorated and pushed aside, all my stuff for when my husband does his calls. But it's just re-examining all the spaces that we have. Sadie, you have so many accomplishments, so many nominations, awards. If you could pick one or two of your biggest accomplishments or something that you're really proud of, what would you share with our viewers as well as those listening to the podcast?
Oh, goodness me. I mean, I think that, I was awarded an OBE, which is, I think, I can't pretend that that's not an unbelievable honor.
Can you tell us what that stands for?
It means you're an officer of the British Empire, and it's something that the Queen awards you.
So you met the Queen?
No, unfortunately, because of lockdown, you go to the palace and it's this extraordinary day, and you go, and it probably isn't the Queen, but a member of the royal family, gives you your medal. And I haven't managed to, hopefully I'll still be able to go to the palace. So that's an extraordinary thing. And the British, when they do things like this, it's, they really do it well. You have this incredible letter that comes from the Prime Minister that says, the Queen, the Prime Minister has told the Queen that he wants to give you, and you're like, oh my God. And I opened it up in the lift, they just sent this letter, and I opened it up and I was like in tears when I came in the door. I'm like, and of course, you're not allowed to tell anybody because it's a big secret. No, you have to. So they say like, oh, you need to let us know if you're going to accept, and you think, of course I'm going to accept. So you're not allowed to tell anyone. Of course, I told my mum, and my loved ones, but otherwise you're not allowed to tell anybody. And so that was a huge honor. And I think the other ones that are important to me, I think, are probably those that are related to be a woman in the industry. And I think that, I hope one day, I was given the inaugural woman leader in architecture a couple of years ago. And they wrote this really lovely thing about me that said she would have got this award anyway, regardless of the fact that she was a woman. And that was really special. But it was also, you kind of reflect on these things. And often people say, oh, we shouldn't be in a place where you have to be rewarded, and you shouldn't just get something because you're a woman. But I think it's still really important to say, do you know what? It's quite hard. It's still quite hard to achieve things, and be a woman. And I think that in this industry, and I'm sure it's the same in many industries, and maybe one day we won't have to say, point out the fact that I am a woman, and that actually maybe the things that I do well, as I said, regardless of whether or not I'm a woman. But I think it's important, and it really means a lot. It meant a lot to the girls in the office. They all came and clapped when it's just like, so I think you realise then that that actually it's important to be proud of your achievements, and a bit like when we started the conversation, it takes a while to think, oh, me, really, me? But, I think that you showing, being grateful when people recognize something in you, I think is important, actually. It's important to say thank you. I have a lovely Swedish friend, and she said, the thing about the Swedes is if anyone says you look lovely, they go, oh no, or like, isn't that dress lovely? And I'm the same. I'm like, oh, well, I bought it in the sale. It only cost me, And she said, Sadie, the thing that you have to learn to do is accept. If somebody says something nice to you, accept it and say thank you. And I think that that's a really good lesson. So I'm really trying to do that now.
I love that. It's so true, right, guys? Like a lot of times people say things, and I don't know if it's a female thing or what, but we're like, oh, no, I do the same thing. Oh, I got it on sale. Oh, it's nothing, not a big deal. Exactly. I didn't work that hard. And you're like, oh, gosh, I did. Before we end or ask how to contact her, does anyone have any other questions? Okay. So if our viewers watching on YouTube or our listeners listening to the podcast would like to find out more about you, contact you, perhaps apply for a position, how can they do that?
All they have to do is email me, and my email is sadie@dRMM.co.uk, or just get in touch with you and you can put that, just write to me.
And I know if you're listening and you're applying for a position, she doesn't want to read through a stack of things. She just wants to know something that you are really passionate about. Is that right?
It's true. I gave a job to a woman, this incredible woman, French woman, who said, I don't look at people's CVs. I go straight to the back where it says your personal thing. She said she was a motorbike mechanic and a really good cook. And I'm like, I think you are fantastic.
Well, okay. we love talking with you. It's obvious your passion, your soul for building, your soul for creating, for risk-taking, resilience, and gratitude. And that is just exactly what Grateful Goddess is, what we all like to hear, to help inspire us to move forward. And I can't wait till we can ride again together, whether it be here in the United States or in London. And even if it's a rainy day, we're going to have a smile on our face, right?
Exactly. And it's always raining in London. No,
always raining. So thank you for joining us on Grateful Goddesses.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Up next, favorite things. Opening up to happiness and joy.
So welcome everyone to Favorite Things portion of Grateful Goddesses with our guest Sadie Morgan. We are going to start with me. My favorite thing I couldn't bring the whole thing up here, but this is my basket that goes on my bike. And I brought it because I love riding my bike, especially on the lake here in Chicago. And a very fond memory, I know I mentioned it, was riding in London with Sadie. And I love the feeling of just being free and having the wind and, while I wear my helmet to be safe, but it just feels so great to go riding. And I love my basket because it reminds me, of course, of the Wizard of Oz. While I'm not the witch, I'm Dorothy on her little bike with the basket. So now we're going to pop over to Rachel and see what her favorite thing is.
Okay. Sadie, with our talk of urban spaces, and we live in the city of Chicago, and I live in a neighborhood called Andersonville. It's an old Swedish neighborhood, and I love where I live. I know many of the store owners. We don't really have a backyard, but we have a back deck. And if I look out, I can see the apartments around me and my neighbors. And it's an incredibly diverse neighborhood in terms of vegetation diverse, and just all ethnicities and languages are spoken. And I feel so lucky to be in this type of environment. And I know, Sadie, you talk a lot about diversity and diversity of environment. And I feel so lucky to live in a neighborhood like that.
Thank you for sharing. Alyssa?
So, as Karen said in the beginning of the episode, much of our connection to the world right now comes through our television. So I have been in a small group of friends where all we do is we trade sort of book recommendations, TV recommendations, we have these kind of lists going. So I'm going to throw out today 3 binge watchable series that I think are great and so completely different. So hopefully one of these will speak to everybody. So I'm going to throw these out. The first one I'm going to recommend is Ted Lasso, starring Jason Sudeikis. Hysterically funny, so smart, so witty. Sadie, it takes place in London. He is a Division II American football coach that goes to coach a Premier League in London, and it's just so smart, and it's the most heartwarming thing, and just puts a smile on your face for like 8 or 9, however many episodes, and that's on Apple TV. Number 2, because we can't travel the world, I'm going to recommend Emily in Paris. It stars Lily Collins, Phil Collins' daughter, and I'm going to call it Sex and the City meets Devil Wears Prada, and it is on Netflix, and it's like this love story to the city of Paris, and I just loved it. The show itself is light and not very deep, but it's just a great a travelogue of Paris. And then lastly, totally different, a show called Tehran, which is written by the creator of or created by one of the writers of, I think that's it, of a series, an Israeli series called Fauda. And this is about a woman who was born in Iran but raised in Israel. She's a Mossad agent and gets kind of trapped in Tehran, and very edge of the seat, kind of gripping series. So I'm going to throw those all out there, and really enjoyed all 3 of those, and certainly makes these long evenings when we can't go out and do anything much, much better.
Long evenings. I binge watch now you've told me those 3, I'll probably be done with them by tomorrow. It's a little insane. Camille, how about you?
What's so funny is one of the shows that I was watching when we had our meet was the Ted Lasso show. That was the show I was watching while we were talking.
Really?
I did. It was interesting because we had to do like a Q&A and stuff, so that's funny. But oddly enough, my favorite thing that I'm bringing is my SAG-AFTRA card. Because during this time, although I live in a very small area that's not very, I live in North Carolina, Cary, North Carolina, and it's not known for its film and art community, but because of lockdown and all this, I'm able to attend all these different classes free through my union. So I'm able to, like the Ted Lasso Q&A and so on, get these classes with people and expand my own education to try to figure out what I can do now that there's more opportunities, because I don't have to just limit myself based on location, like with working with you wonderful ladies now. So that's
we love
one of
to
my
have you.
It's my new passport.
Joelle?
It's going to sound very corny, but right now, working from home and doing the work that I do from home, as a therapist, working over the computer, and holding space for people, and it can be, intense work. So it sounds corny, but they're pictures of my kids that I have, very particular ones that I have spaced out around my desk in my workspace, because it just keeps me kind of grounded and reminds me to come back to myself. And I think it really allows me, when I have long days, to just kind of keep on coming back to my center and to my core, and something that's very true for me. So I didn't bring them to show you. But yeah, that right now, I feel like that's something that's really getting me through. So yeah.
Now photos are, I'm surprised you didn't notice.
Can't see. That's on my desk too.
This is of a mutual friend's 50th birthday. Yeah. I mean, we talked about, that was a great night. That was a great night. I love that. Laura?
I brought a new cookbook, that I bought. And just when you think you can't learn another thing about a salad or a bowl, I mean, one of my friends texted me the same thing during this time and said, do you have this cookbook, Mandy's? And it's all about salads, like new salads. And I was thinking, I cannot learn a new thing about a salad. I mean, that is like, I thought I knew it all, but Mandy's cookbook is basically on the back of the cookbook, which you can see is a stunning cookbook. And I've been getting lots of new recipes online in the last 5 years. I rarely buy a cookbook anymore, but look how beautiful it is. And it says on the back, there's nothing a Mandy's salad can't fix. And I agree. My family is over the moon with these new salad dressings. And literally I can put the dressing on lettuce and add a couple of sunflower seeds and shaved Parmesan. And everybody is like moaning as they eat this salad. So I highly recommend it. And the story of Mandy's restaurant is really fascinating. It's two sisters. They're from Montreal in Canada. And they started off, one of the sisters was into making salads and dressings, and she was selling them out of a clothing store that her boyfriend owned. And they ended up going into business together, two sisters. They had many locations in Montreal, and they were supposed to open up in Toronto in the fall, in the spring, but because of everything, it's on hold. But I highly recommend, and I ordered it on Amazon.
I ordered one too, by the way, because another sister-in-law told me, and I felt the same way, like how many more salads can we make, right? But she said it was great. I can't wait to get it. Yeah. Last but not least, our guest, Sadie Morgan. Can't wait to hear what your favorite thing is, or one of them.
Oh, well, do you know what? I'm like, oh my goodness, I could cook a salad. I'm so excited. Buy that book.
You know what you think.
This might be the answer.
A house dressing, it's amazing. And order some plastic salad dressing shakers on Amazon.
You know what? Maybe you could copy that and send it to all of us, and we'll send it to Sadie.
Yeah. Oh my goodness me. I'm feeling like suddenly my life might change. It's amazing. Well, I bought two things. One which is very practical, and one which is very meaningful. So this is a picture of me and my father, and I take this everywhere. This is just when I graduated from the Royal College of Art, and he died very soon after that, very suddenly. And I miss him really loads, and I'm really grateful to have had him in my life. And I think he taught me a lot about, and it's really faded now. So I'm worried one day he'll disappear, but he'll always be there in my heart. And then the next thing, this is my big recommendation, is a notebook, and I'm not very organized.
That's surprising. You seem like you are. Your home is really clean and organized.
Goodness me, no, I'm not very organized. Whenever I meet anybody or I have like New Year's resolutions, it's like, I'm going to have a notebook and I'm going to write all the things that I need to do. And then, and I've always had notebooks and I've never written in them. And so I bought the most expensive notebook in the whole world. And it's leather bound, and it's got this beautiful gold clip on it, and it's so unbelievably eye-wateringly expensive that I have to write in it, and I have to fill it up because otherwise it would be wasteful. And so it's been brilliant, and I write everything whenever I have meetings or. Whenever I'm working, I write notes and then I go back to them because I often have extraordinary conversations, and I'm able to sort of go back and read over them or remind myself of something that I'd done the week before. And sometimes I make little sketches in it, and so. This was my big lockdown discovery, which is my notebook, and it's the best investment I made this year.
Oh, it's beautiful. I love it. Maybe you'll add the salad dressing recipe to it.
I think
You
I
can-
can.
Sadie, I love writing
Exactly.
things.
I'm going to make some notes.
Okay. Rachel's mentioned before, she loves those kinds of stores, stationery stores and journal stores and all of that. What is that particular one called? So we can look it up and see how much it really cost.
Oh, no doubt. This is the Smithson. So it's a very old-fashioned English brand.
But it's okay. There's no judgment. It's great to treat yourself like that. If that makes you happy, I mean, if it costs as much as a dinner out, I mean, it's worth it. Or if it costs as much as a car, no, but
not that bad. No, but it's definitely, I think, I mean, I would rarely do something like that. But as I said before, because I've tried and failed so many times, I thought if it was really special, then I would take care of it, and I have. So
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Rachel had given me and a few of us these little field notes with the "You Are Beautiful" stickers. But any type of journal is just great to record, and you can look back. Our guest, Elaine Soloway, wrote in a journal that she keeps looking back at seeing what she did on that particular day a year ago, and it's very cool to do. Thank you for sharing your favorite things with us, Sadie, and thank you for joining us on Grateful Goddesses.
Unleashed your inner goddess yet? Thanks for joining us today on Grateful Goddesses. We invite you to visit our website, www.gratefulgoddesses.com, to access today's show notes as well as other helpful resources. Don't forget to leave a review. Until next time, stay strong and empowered to be a grateful goddess.